Hey guys, welcome back to Tipharot. It's me, Matt here. First of all, apologies if there's any clicks or pops or weirdness in the audio for this video. I'm having some trouble with the software that does my noise cancelling, and it's been giving me issues for the last hour, and it wasn't even working a moment ago. So hopefully it's fixed now and it's working, but if there's any audio issues, I apologize. Anyway, today we're doing a Q&A where I take a bunch of your questions and answer them in this video. So without further ado, let's get on to the questions. How long can lucid dreams last? So a lucid dream can in theory last as long as your entire REM period, which means you can have a dream that lasts around about an hour, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But 99% of your dreams are going to be a lot shorter than that, and that's because you tend to have fragmented dreams anyway. So in a given REM period, instead of having one long dream, you're more likely to have, say, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5 dreams in that period that are all a bit shorter. On top of that, when you're actually lucid, you can easily get excited and have the dream end like that, or a dream can just destabilize for various reasons. So most of your lucid dreams are going to be nowhere near that upper end length, but you can, in theory, get dreams lasting that long. A more reasonable length to aim for if you want to have long dreams is around 15 to 20 minutes long. Question number 2. How long does a typical wake-initiated lucid dream fashion technique take to work? So how long does wild, DLD, all of those, how long do they take to work? Well, honestly, it can be really quick. If you just wake up and while you're still laying there, you haven't even opened your eyes, you decide right away, I'm going to do wild or I'm going to do DEILD and go right back into the dream I just left, then you can honestly do it in a matter of seconds. I've had some times where I would wake up and probably 10 seconds later or less, I would actually be in a lucid dream. But if you actually don't do that, if you get up, you dream journal, you check your phone, maybe even go to the bathroom, and you come back and you decide, I'm going to do wild now, well, then it can take a bit longer. It can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe even 15 or 20 minutes, depending on the person. Now, obviously, this is something that's a little bit hard to actually time unless you're sitting there and actually counting through the entire process, but I'd estimate for wild, it probably takes me between 3 and 5 minutes on average, and for DEILD, it's more like 2 to 3 minutes. Just be aware that this is going to vary from person to person. Question number 3, are there any tips for wild? So when you're performing wild, my number 1 tip is just to relax. Don't try to lay still or anything like that, like some guides suggest. Just lay the way that you would lay if you were going to sleep. And that means, if you need to fidget. If you need to lay in some weird contorted position to feel comfortable, do it. If you want to lay on your side, do it. Don't worry about laying still on your back like a rock. The reason that a lot of guides give that advice probably stems from the fact that old wild guides used to almost all advise you to get into sleep paralysis. And if you want to get to sleep paralysis, your body needs to remain still for some time. However, you do not need to enter sleep paralysis when performing wild, and it's actually quicker to not go into it, for myself at least, and probably for most people. But also, even if you do decide you want to enter sleep paralysis for one reason or another, trying to lay still usually results in you tensing all your muscles and getting really rigid, which is not relaxing, and you need to relax to enter sleep paralysis. That's what's important. It's not about forcing your body to remain still by holding all of your muscles in place. It's about relaxing and not consciously, moving and kicking and everything. So just laying there normally will give you the best results. Next question. I don't seem to wake up from alarms. What should I do? Well, I often advise people who don't want to use alarms for whatever reason to just rely on their own internal alarm. When I was a kid, my dad taught me this. He said that if I wanted to be up at a particular time without an alarm, I should just tell myself before bed that I was going to wake up at 7 a.m. or that I was going to wake up in however many hours. And at first when I heard this, I thought this sounded a bit ludicrous, but I tried it out and sure enough, first try, it worked perfectly. Now, this might not work 100% of the time, every time for every person. So if you have some important appointment, it's probably good to have some kind of backup, whether that be a traditional alarm or in your case, if those don't work, maybe someone to actually wake you up or something like that. But try this out and you might be surprised at how well it works. And you can start setting your own internal alarm every night instead of relying on the sound of an external one to wake you. Next set of questions. How do conversations with dream characters differ from IRL conversations? Do you have a certain amount of control or expectation on what DCs will say, or is it as much of a surprise as with real people? Well, it typically is a surprise, but it's not quite as much of a surprise as with real people. That's the way I describe it. It's not like you are looking at their thoughts and seeing exactly what they're going to say before they say it, unless you're actively making an effort to do that, unless you're actively making an effort to control what they say, then it sort of feels like talking to a real person. But generally what's in your head is going to affect how they respond. So it's a little bit different, and especially as you get more and more experienced with interacting with dream characters, you're going to start to learn to sort of predict the way that they're going to respond just based on how you're feeling at that moment and what you're thinking. So even when you aren't trying to influence the responses, you might have an idea of how they're going to respond to you. So it's not quite as much of a surprise as with real people, but it's still usually a little bit of a surprise, if that makes sense. Next question. For people who struggle with conversation, could it be an effective way to get practice? Maybe. Yes and no. I mean, you can certainly practice with dream characters and practice talking to them and so on, but it might not be a perfect substitute for the real thing. For example, I have severe social anxiety, and interacting with people can be very difficult for me in lots of different ways. But for me, I know dream characters are just figments of my imagination, products of my subconscious. So when I interact with them, I don't have any of my usual social anxiety. So I can't really use speaking to them to practice fighting my anxiety, really, because it's just not there when I interact with them. Next question. Can I travel to anime world? Well, you can travel to any world that you like, whether it's a real one or a fictional one from, a TV series or a video game or whatever. You can travel to worlds of your own creation even. Anything that you can imagine, you can pretty much experience or go to in a lucid dream. Next question. So this is on the how to continue a dream video that I posted, and someone asks, what if I had the dream 9 hours ago? Well, you can certainly perform DEILD even if the dream was a while ago. Obviously, the fresher it is, the easier DEILD tends to be, and the best is if you just came out of that dream, because then, like I was saying earlier, you can literally get back into that dream in seconds sometimes. Now, if you're doing DEILD later that day, in a nap, or you're doing it the next night or a week later or whatever, then it's going to be a little bit less effective using that previous dream that's not so fresh in your memory, but it will still work and you can still do that. And in fact, I sometimes like to do that over actually going back into the specific dream that I was in just then. I will often pick just a recent vivid dream that I really enjoyed and try to go back into that instead, especially if the previous dream that I just came out of wasn't that great. Next question. Hey Tipharot, when meditating, are you supposed to just pay attention to your breathing or other sensations as well, like the wind going through your body, itching, etc.? Well, it depends on what kind of meditation that you're doing. The standard breath meditation I talk about on this channel, you are supposed to be paying attention to your breathing, and when you start to notice other things, it's not the end of the world, just bring your attention back to your breath. Same thing if you get an itch, don't worry about it, you can scratch the itch, whatever, and then just bring your attention back to your breath. Next question. How much time do you spend dream journaling when you have more than 2 dreams a night? I'm curious. Typically not that long, depending on how awake I am and how motivated I am to dream journal. My dream journal entries can vary from being like a single sentence long to being quite long and detailed. But even when I am writing long and detailed entries, I'm a fast typer, so I tend to do them very, very quickly. And it's usually just 1 or 2 of my dreams that I flesh out in detail, usually the ones that are the most exciting and interesting to me, whereas the others will stay in the few sentence mark. So typically it doesn't take me more than like 2 or 3 minutes to get all of my dreams down, honestly. Maybe like 5 or 6 minutes if I have a bunch of really long ones that night. Next question. What about using meditation music? Not guided meditation, but something like binaural beats. I usually listen to them all the way through my meditation. Is it more or less beneficial to listen to them? Well, I think it's perfectly fine to listen to music while meditating, as long as it's not like distracting from your meditation. If it helps you relax, then great. One thing I will say though is anything like that, anything that does help you relax, don't rely on it as a crutch. You can use it for your meditation sessions, but do some without it as well. And I would even suggest every so often meditating in an environment where it's hard to relax and where it's hard to pay attention to your breath. I like to sometimes just go outside and sit in my garden when it's like really noisy outside, when there's like cars going past and people mowing their lawns and stuff. Or I'll meditate on the bus somewhere where there's people talking around me and sounds of cars and everything. Because if you're meditating properly, then it shouldn't really matter what your outside environment is like. You should be able to meditate anywhere, even with tons of distractions, even with tons of noise around you. Next question. Hey, I have a question. Is it possible to have a half of a lucid dream? Because I think I had one last night. So I'm assuming what you mean here is it possible to be lucid through, say, the first half of the dream and then not be lucid through the rest of it? And the simple answer to that is yes, you can definitely have dreams where you have lucidity and then you lose it, especially if you didn't have that much lucidity to begin with. Anyway, that's been all for today's questions. If you have some lucid dreaming questions of your own, feel free to leave them down in the comments on any of my videos, because when I make these videos, I tend to go through fairly randomly just to pick out some interesting questions I could answer in this. And you should also check out my lucid dreaming book, The Lucid Dream Book, because I answer a lot of these kinds of questions in there. You can find a link to it in the top right hand corner or down in the description below. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and enable all notifications if you want to stay up to date with my videos. And if you want to keep watching right now, then check out one of those videos on screen, go watch that, and I'll see you there soon. Take care.